The MC's fist burned with flaming mana as he punched forward. A huge impact burst through the crowd as his fist slammed into a demon, sending it flying. In a flash, he struck down several more. He crushed one beneath his foot before dashing through the swarm with lightning-fast movements. Narrowing his eyes, he poured all of his strength into a blazing punch that smashed into a giant demon. Without slowing down, he kicked another demon aside before defeating the remaining monsters one after another. Finally, he leaped high into the air and drove his flaming fist into a dragon. Before all of this happened, it had been an ordinary day. A dog barked loudly as it ran around while Sasuke slowly opened his eyes and sat up on a nearby bench. He wondered if he had been dreaming about those days again. Sasuke was an 18-year-old unemployed young man. 5 years earlier, during the month of August in his first year of junior high school, he had suddenly been transported to another world. That day happened to be the birthday of a girl who lived in his neighborhood. He had been on his way to the party at her house. They had grown up together, making them childhood friends with a long history between them. She had always been incredibly charming, with beauty that easily caught everyone's attention. Seeing her smile, Sasuke realized it was the perfect opportunity to confess his feelings. He handed her a beautiful necklace as a birthday present. It had taken a great deal of effort to earn the money for it by helping his father and grandmother far more than usual. His grandfather's shoulders had been so stiff that giving him a massage nearly exhausted him, while his grandmother had laughed happily and wished he would always be so helpful. The girl happily accepted the necklace and wore it immediately, praising Sasuke for always being so devoted to his family. Blushing with nervousness, Sasuke finally confessed the feelings he had been keeping hidden. She gently apologized and rejected his confession. At that moment, the young Sasuke's world seemed to collapse. Looking back on it now, he realized it had been an impulsive confession. His childhood friend was beautiful, talented in both academics and sports, and naturally admired by many boys. Compared to her, he felt he had nothing to offer. Heartbroken, he ran away in tears. That day became one of the most chaotic days of his life. Consumed by despair and anger, he cried as he sprinted through the streets, randomly breakdanced in the middle of a railroad crossing, and eventually stripped completely naked before diving into the ocean. Before he realized what had happened, he found himself standing in an entirely different world. Still completely naked. Overwhelmed by panic, Sasuke immediately tried to run away, but the mysterious people behind him chased after him. Completely confused, he had no idea where he was or who those people were. He soon learned that the world was called Degreefia, and that he had been summoned because its people believed he was the hero destined to defeat the Demon King and save their world. Sasuke refused without hesitation. He could not understand why they had chosen him, when there surely had to be someone else more suitable. The woman before him firmly insisted that he become their hero and save the world. Sasuke protested desperately. He was only a middle school student who should have been living an ordinary life. Only moments earlier, he had been enjoying his youth before everything had suddenly been taken away from him. As memories of his rejected confession resurfaced, his heart sank once again. He accepted the painful reality while sinking deeper into despair. Meanwhile, the people surrounding him celebrated the birth of their hero. People often said that time healed every wound, but back then, Sasuke felt completely swallowed by hopelessness. Despite his gloomy expression, everyone believed his presence alone radiated the dignity of a true hero and that he would surely lead Degreefia to victory against the Demon King. From that point onward, events unfolded much like the stories told about legendary heroes. His adventures were filled with friendship, hardship, and countless battles. Even when faced with overwhelming odds, he and his companions overcame every obstacle together and continued moving forward. As time passed, his combat skills became exceptional. He defeated monsters with overwhelming strength, struck down demons one after another with incredible speed, and crushed every enemy that stood before him. Even mighty dragons eventually fell before his power. His companions placed their trust in him, while the knights admired his strength and courage. At the end of countless sacrifices and relentless effort, the Demon King was finally defeated. The once despairing boy, who had been called a hero only in name, had truly become the world's greatest champion. Peace returned to Degreefia, and the people celebrated him as their savior. His fame spread across the kingdom. He was honored by everyone, recorded in history textbooks, and even became the main character in children's picture books. He confidently believed that no enemy could ever defeat him again. It should have continued that way. Yet one day, when he opened his eyes, he found himself back in his original world. Confused, he struggled to understand what had happened. His memories were hazy. He vaguely remembered drinking and preparing to take a bath before everything suddenly changed. Looking around, he noticed a familiar sandbox where he had played as a child. Only then did the truth sink in. He had returned. Sasuke had been forced back from the other world without warning. The realization struck him immediately. If he had truly returned, what had happened to Degreefia? Before he could process everything, someone called out to him. Turning around in confusion, he found himself face to face with a police officer. The officer questioned him about his occupation. Without thinking, Sasuke answered according to the life he had known for years. He had been a hero. Unfortunately, reality was far less heroic. Just like when he had first arrived into Griefia, he had once again returned completely naked. Although he had saved another world and brought peace to an entire kingdom, back in modern society, he was nothing more than an unemployed man with an empty work history. When the officer asked where he worked, Sasuke instinctively thought about his years of adventuring before realizing he had no job at all. To everyone else, he was simply an unemployed, suspicious naked man. Thus began the new life of Sasuke, the former hero of another world, as he struggled to restart his life in reality. Sasuke had once been summoned to another world, where he defeated the Demon King, but before he knew it, he had been returned to his original world. Now he found himself being questioned by the police, completely confused about what was happening or what they were talking about. The officers questioned why he had been wandering around the park without a job. Sasuke insisted that he was not unemployed, but the hero who had saved Griefia. The officers dismissed his claims as nonsense, believing there was no such thing as demon kings. However, Sasuke firmly believed they truly existed. He could even sense a demonic presence somewhere within the city. If necessary, he was prepared to defeat it, just as he had defeated dragons before, and urged them to call his guardians because they were wasting valuable time. Ignoring everything he said, the officers concluded that his memories were simply confused and asked him to put some clothes on. Although Sasuke was completely serious, nobody believed him. Suddenly, one of the officers realized that Sasuke had been the subject of a missing persons report filed years earlier. Moments later, his grandparents arrived, followed by several of his friends, all relieved to see him alive and healthy. The officers assured them that Sasuke was physically fine, although he had been wandering around claiming to be a legendary hero. Sasuke desperately tried to explain that he truly had returned from another world, but before he could finish, his grandfather smacked him on the head for making everyone worry and dragged him home. Just like that, the story of the hero came to an abrupt end. The following day, Sasuke accepted that he would simply have to continue living in this world. A boy who had once been told to become a hero had actually accomplished that impossible task. Compared to battling the Demon King, living in a peaceful world should have been much easier. Encouraged to move forward, Sasuke decided to treat this as his second chance at life. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but reality quickly caught up with him. Having spent his teenage years serving as a hero, he had never worked a normal job before and was writing his very first resume. Then a terrifying realization struck him. Because he had been summoned at 13 years old and devoted himself entirely to saving another world, he had never graduated from middle school. His highest educational achievement was elementary school. During a job interview, he confidently explained that his greatest skill was reinforcing his body with magic, making him stronger than a dragon and perfectly suited for physically demanding work. He also proudly described how he had traveled across the world to defeat the Demon King and overcome countless hardships using his abilities. Unfortunately, none of it sounded realistic to the interviewer, who advised him that graduating from middle school would be far more useful than claiming magical abilities. Shocked that his greatest accomplishments meant nothing in this world, Sasuke desperately searched for another practical skill, but realized that fighting was all he truly knew. The only ordinary talent he could think of was making perfect mud balls. Needless to say, he was immediately rejected. Returning home in disappointment, Sasuke angrily complained that nobody believed his magic, despite the evidence and countless quests he had completed. He had even written several magic spells on his resume, along with the remarkable quality of his mud balls, but none of it mattered. His grandfather quickly scolded him for shouting. Although Sasuke gathered the determination to keep trying, his lack of education continued to become a major obstacle. Every interviewer looked disappointed the moment they saw his resume, and rejection after rejection slowly wore him down. Defeating the Demon King had somehow been easier than searching for employment. Eventually, after countless failures, he finally managed to secure a part-time job at a local supermarket. Though it was only a small step forward, he considered it progress compared to remaining unemployed. Even so, he could not help comparing himself to his friends, who were entering universities or beginning successful careers while he remained stuck behind. Ko had already found a job, Yoshi had entered an elite school, and even his best friend Ken had apparently moved away to continue his studies. Sasuke felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. He wanted to become someone who would no longer make his family and friends worry. After all, his sudden return from Griefia had caused them enough pain already. Determined to continue improving himself, he headed home with plans to work on his resume once again. Along the way, a loud scream suddenly caught his attention. Looking toward the source of the commotion, he saw several men surrounding a frightened young woman. They continued closing in while clearly intimidating her. Unsure what they were doing, Sasuke found the situation irritating, especially after the discouraging day he had already experienced. He approached them and warned them to stop acting tough, reminding them that they were living in the Reiwa era and threatening to call the police if they continued. The men mocked his worn-out appearance and insulted him by calling him an old man. Their words struck a nerve. Sasuke had always been self-conscious about looking much older than his actual age, and being mocked for it only worsened his already sour mood. As one of the men forcefully grabbed the young woman despite her obvious resistance, Sasuke finally stepped in, declaring that enough was enough. The moment he got a clear look at her face, however, he froze. It was Shikigami Katsumi. They had grown up together as childhood friends, and she had been his first love. Instantly, the painful memory of her rejecting his confession just before he had been summoned to Degreefia came rushing back. Before he could fully process the reunion, the men attempted to force Katsumi onto a motorcycle. Seeing her in danger caused Sasuke's expression to darken. He silently vowed to rescue her no matter what. Taking a fighting stance, he prepared himself for battle. The men laughed at him and welcomed the confrontation, but Sasuke remained unfazed. In one swift motion, with sharp eyes filled with determination, he charged straight toward them. In a swift motion, Sasuke rushed toward the man. Hearing Katsumi's shocked reaction only strengthened his resolve. He told himself to wait, reminding himself that this was no longer Degreefia. This was not a world where he could simply throw a punch and solve everything. If he lost control here, he would only make the people around him worry once again. Distracted by those thoughts, he failed to notice the punch flying straight toward him. The blow slammed into his face, sending him crashing to the ground. As the men mocked him and prepared to leave on their motorcycles, they warned him never to stand against them again, claiming that the area now belonged to the Venom Legion. Once they disappeared, Katsumi hurried over to him, worried that he had been hurt because of her. Sasuke struggled to his feet, realizing how pathetic he had become. He could hardly believe that he had once been called a hero. After making sure he was all right, Katsumi quietly remarked that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. Sasuke agreed. Nearly 4.5 years had passed since he had last looked upon her face. When he had returned from the other world and been taken in by the police, she had never come to see him. He had always assumed it was because she had rejected his confession, making things too awkward between them. As they sat together, Katsumi reminisced about the days when they used to play in the park as children. She remembered how Sasuke would always drag her along on little adventures and how she constantly stumbled and fell, leaving him to worry about her. Suddenly, tears welled up in her eyes as she apologized over and over, confessing that she had carried guilt for years. She believed that if she had not rejected him that day, perhaps he never would have disappeared from her life. Sasuke was stunned. Memories of Katsumi desperately chasing after him that day came flooding back. Realizing she had blamed herself all this time, he immediately tried to reassure her that none of it had been her fault. He knew he had to explain everything, but every time he talked about the other world, nobody believed him. Even so, he decided to tell her the truth, no matter how unbelievable it sounded. Just as he began explaining that he had been transported to another world on that very day, someone suddenly interrupted them. A handsome young man approached and greeted them before introducing himself as Ryo Shido, one of Katsumi's classmates. He had been looking for her because they had volunteer club activities and a meeting with the neighborhood association. Recognizing Sasuke's name from stories Katsumi had told him, Shido complimented his mature appearance, joking that it was hard to believe they were the same age and that he would look impressive wearing a business suit. Although the comments irritated Sasuke, Katsumi quickly scolded Shido for being rude before the two of them hurried off together. Before leaving, Katsumi promised that they would meet again soon and properly talk. Watching them walk away side by side, Sasuke could not help feeling that the closeness between them suggested they were dating. Seeing his first love grow into such a beautiful young woman left him with bittersweet feelings, and despite knowing it could not be helped, he felt emotionally drained. Even so, he reminded himself that he still had work at his part-time job. No matter how difficult reality became, he had to keep moving forward if he wanted to survive. Later that day, Sasuke worked at the local supermarket, doing his best to greet customers despite struggling with customer service. He was determined to fit into society as quickly as possible. When a customer asked where the eggs were, he froze, realizing he had no idea where they were located. Embarrassed, he prepared to check, only to overhear insults about his intelligence and education. He silently fumed, knowing he had once received an education before his life had been interrupted. Fortunately, his senior co-worker, Sasami Miko, stepped in and politely guided the customers to the eggs before giving Sasuke an encouraging wink. Soon afterward, the manager reassured him that he would improve little by little. Their kindness deeply moved him, making him realize he had found an excellent workplace. After finishing their shift, Sasami invited Sasuke to walk home together. As they talked, he thanked her for always helping him, while she insisted she was simply grateful for his strength whenever heavy lifting was required. Sasami was a senior at work who would have been his classmate if his life had followed a normal path. She was cheerful, caring, and easy to talk to. During their conversation, she mentioned that she was considering becoming a nursery teacher in the future. When she asked what Sasuke wanted to become, he found himself unable to answer. At the moment, his life revolved entirely around part-time work and job hunting. Looking back, it felt as though life had thrown one hardship after another at him without pause. His first heartbreak, being returned to Earth completely naked, and suffering 50 consecutive job rejections all flashed through his mind. Sensing his discouragement, Sassamine encouraged him by pointing out that he had remarkable physical strength and reminding him that people who continued making an effort would eventually find what they were capable of doing. Her words lifted his spirits, making him feel as though she were some kind of goddess. He decided that perhaps he simply needed to keep trying a little harder. Sassamine admitted that walking home with him made her feel much safer because of strange rumors spreading around town. People claimed that dark, shadowy figures had begun appearing at night. Sasuke dismissed the stories with a sarcastic response, having witnessed far more unbelievable things than ghosts during his adventures in another world. Even if ghosts truly existed, they would never frighten him. As they continued walking, however, Sasuke suddenly sensed an unusual presence. Looking behind him revealed nothing, but the strange feeling lingered. Sassamine confessed that she genuinely feared walking home alone at night because her mother rarely came to pick her up. Understanding her concerns, Sasuke suggested walking her home whenever possible or asking other co-workers or the manager for help. Grateful, Sassamine asked for his contact information. Since Sasuke still carried an old flip phone and struggled with modern technology, she recommended that he eventually buy a smartphone. After escorting her safely home, the two said goodbye. As Sassamine disappeared inside, Sasuke focused on the strange presence he had sensed. It did not feel vague like a ghost. Instead, it possessed an unmistakable aura overflowing with magical energy. The sensation reminded him of monsters from Degrifia. Ever since returning to Earth, he had occasionally felt traces of that same presence throughout the city. But why would such creatures exist in this world? Suddenly, the aura grew much stronger. Realizing it was nearby, Sasuke immediately rushed toward its source, determined to uncover what was truly happening. At night, the town was enveloped by a strange aura overflowing with magical power. Sasuke immediately sensed that there were two powerful presences. Magic itself existed in every living creature on Earth, just as naturally as the air surrounding them, but the difference lay in its concentration. These two possessed an overwhelming amount of it. Since returning from the other world, this was the first time he had ever encountered an aura like this. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he witnessed a man being hurled through the air. The injured man twisted his body midair, regained his balance, and landed heavily while breathing in pain. His body was covered in wounds. Seeing Sasuke nearby, the man was shocked that an ordinary civilian had somehow entered the barrier surrounding the area. He urgently tried to send Sasuke away, but Sasuke refused, unable to ignore the man's severe injuries. Before either of them could react further, a deep growl echoed through the night. Moments later, a gigantic monster emerged from the darkness, effortlessly crushing a nearby car beneath its enormous claws. The creature mocked the wounded man, making it clear that escape was impossible. At the sight of the monster, Sasuke was stunned. The beast eagerly prepared to devour both of them. Refusing to let an innocent civilian become involved, the injured man gathered the last of his strength, raised his hands, and began channeling magic. Streams of magical energy flowed from his body as he launched himself into the air and attacked despite his injuries. The monster effortlessly avoided the assault before charging straight toward him. Watching the battle unfold, Sasuke immediately recognized both the monster and the magician. Such beings had been common in Degrifia, but nobody had ever told him they also existed on Earth. The monster's speed proved overwhelming. In the blink of an eye, its sharp claws struck the magician, sending him crashing violently to the ground once more. As the monster mocked humanity's weakness, the battered magician struggled to move beneath his countless injuries. Although Sasuke had countless questions about what was happening, he decided those answers could wait. Stepping forward, he assumed a fighting stance and ordered the wounded man to stay back. Ignoring the desperate warning to run, Sasuke calmly faced the monster. He realized this creature was likely the mysterious being everyone in town had mistaken for a ghost. The monster dismissed his words, insisting that the matter had nothing to do with him. Sasuke disagreed. This was his hometown. He had no intention of abandoning an injured person, and above all else, his friends were living in fear because of this creature. With his resolve made, he declared that the monster would die. Amused by the confidence of an ordinary human, the tiger-like monster charged at him with incredible speed, darting wildly from one direction to another. Even the wounded magician believed no normal person could possibly follow its movements. The monster lunged from above, preparing to tear Sasuke apart. At the very last moment, Sasuke effortlessly sidestepped the attack, caught its claw, spun the enormous beast through the air, and slammed it into the ground with overwhelming force. Before the monster could recover, Sasuke had already closed the distance. One devastating punch connected squarely with its face, launching the massive creature high into the sky. The magician could only stare in complete disbelief. As the wounded monster plummeted back toward the ground, Sasuke calmly gathered magical energy into his fist. Before it could land, he unleashed another devastating blow in midair. A tremendous shockwave erupted from the impact as blood burst from the monster's mouth. When the dust settled, the creature hung lifeless from Sasuke's fist. He casually threw the corpse to the ground, stepped on it, and delivered one final punch to ensure it was completely dead. Letting out a tired sigh, Sasuke looked down at his own hands. It had been a long time since he had used an enhancement spell, yet his magic still worked just as well as he remembered. The magician stared at him in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend the overwhelming power he had just witnessed. Snapping back to reality, Sasuke hurried over to check the man's condition, worrying more about his injuries than the battle itself. He immediately decided to call an ambulance. Before he could do so, however, the magician asked who he truly was. For a brief moment, Sasuke almost introduced himself as the hero, but he stopped himself. He no longer held that title. Instead, he simply described himself as a courageous young man. As Sasuke continued checking his condition, the injured magician suddenly bowed his head deeply before him. With utmost sincerity, he begged Sasuke to accept him as a disciple, leaving Sasuke completely dumbfounded. Back at home, Sasuke felt soreness throughout his entire body. It was probably muscle pain from using his body enhancement technique for the first time in a long while. Even so, he found it surprising that there were people on Earth capable of using magic as well. Feeling that the situation would only become more troublesome, he had simply hurried home after the battle. The whole experience almost felt like a dream. Just then, someone loudly called out to him from outside. As Sasuke opened the front door, he found the injured magician from the previous night standing there. The young man immediately apologized for visiting so late and introduced himself as Takatsuki Kuji. Seeing him in person confirmed that the previous night's events had not been a dream after all. After briefly thanking Takatsuki for his efforts during the battle, Sasuke abruptly shut the door. Takatsuki desperately pleaded from outside, asking him to open up because he had something important to discuss. Confused about how Takatsuki had even found his address, Sasuke listened as the young magician explained that they needed his help with an important mission. Takatsuki believed Sasuke to be an extraordinary first-class wizard and explained that, since they could no longer expect reinforcements from Alteria, they had no choice but to ask for his assistance. Completely puzzled, Sasuke finally opened the door again and admitted that he had no idea what Alteria even was. Before Takatsuki could answer, a woman stepped forward and calmly remarked that anyone unfamiliar with Alteria could not possibly be an officially recognized wizard. Introducing herself as Tsukumura Kane, she explained that Alteria was the world's largest magical organization and that she taught at a magic academy affiliated with it. Takatsuki Kuji was one of her third-year high school students. Hearing that there was an actual magic school on Earth left Sasuke astonished. Tsukumura continued by explaining that she had brought 5 of her strongest students to the city as part of a practical training mission assigned by Alteria. Their objective was to exterminate every demon that had appeared in the area and stabilize the flow of the ley lines. Takatsuki admitted that the demons had proven far stronger than expected, which was why he had suffered such severe injuries during the previous night's battle. If they failed, not only would the students be endangered, but the city's residents would also become victims. Learning that innocent people were at risk immediately caught Sasuke's attention. Takatsuki further explained that unfortunate circumstances prevented Alteria from sending reinforcements, making Sasuke's overwhelming strength their only hope. Curious, Sasuke asked whether these demons were similar to the tiger monster he had defeated and how many remained. Tsukumura estimated that around 14 demons were still roaming the city, with one particularly powerful individual among them. Without much hesitation, Sasuke agreed to help. Takatsuki was overjoyed, but Tsukumura remained cautious. She pointed out that Sasuke knew almost nothing about the magical world on Earth. He had never attended a magic academy, was not officially recognized as a wizard, and possessed only fragmented knowledge by their standards. More importantly, Alteria offered no compensation whatsoever to unofficial magicians. They would essentially be asking him to risk his life without receiving anything in return, something she believed no sensible adult should ever do. Sasuke quietly disagreed. To him, this was never about personal gain or loss. Although he admitted that he knew very little about Earth's magical society and understood why they considered him unofficial, none of that mattered. The demons threatened his family and friends. Knowing he possessed the strength to protect them, how could he possibly ignore that danger and continue living an ordinary life? He believed his abilities were more than enough to stand alongside them. Amused by his confidence, Tsukumura finally accepted his determination and formally requested his cooperation. Sasuke readily agreed. After seeing them off, he reflected on how harsh reality had always been since returning to Earth. He had once believed that the power he gained as the hero of another world would never have any purpose here. Yet now he realized there was something only he could do. He could still fight. He could still protect people, and that alone gave his strength meaning. Later, after informing his grandparents that he would be home late and asking them to save him some dinner, Sasuke met up with Takatsuki. Takatsuki praised him for being considerate toward his family, though Sasuke felt it was simply common courtesy. As they headed toward the meeting place, Takatsuki suddenly asked whether Sasuke had reconsidered accepting him as a disciple. Remembering the request from the previous night, Sasuke immediately refused. Shocked, Takatsuki wondered if he was too weak or perhaps too young to qualify. Hearing that only irritated Sasuke, who quickly pointed out that he himself was only 18 years old. Takatsuki froze in disbelief before sincerely apologizing, admitting that he had honestly believed Sasuke was at least 25 because of his mature appearance. Before Sasuke could fully recover from the unexpected age gap, Takatsuki hurried him toward the gathering point. Upon arriving at the park, they found the rest of the group already waiting. Several students immediately complained about how late they were, while Takatsuki reminded them to keep their voices down so they would not disturb the nearby residents. Hidden behind the bushes for a moment, Sasuke quietly observed the group. These were the elite students Tsukumura had mentioned earlier. The 5 strongest members of Kanto High's famed divine swordsmen, chosen by Alteria for this mission. Looking at them, Sasuke could not help but think that every single one of them was unbelievably attractive. They looked so good that they could probably become a successful idol group if they wanted. His attention naturally settled on the beautiful black-haired girl standing beside Tsukumura. The moment she turned around, Sasuke's eyes widened in complete shock. It was Katsumi. Sasuke cried out inwardly in shock when he saw Kazumi, unable to believe she was there. Tsukumura asked Takatsuki where the man was, and Takatsuki replied that he would bring him over immediately. Hearing this, Sasuke froze. He quickly waved Takatsuki over, signaling for him to come closer while the young girl nearby wondered what was going on. As Takatsuki approached, Sasuke nervously asked whether that really was Kazumi and not some kind of look-alike. His attention then shifted to the elegant young man standing beside her. Looking more carefully, he recognized him as the same person who had been with Kazumi before, someone who had mentioned they belonged to the same club. Takatsuki explained that whenever they carried out missions outside the school in residential areas, they claimed they were participating in club activities. It was necessary to conceal the existence of magic from ordinary people. The revelation stunned Sasuke. That meant Kazumi also attended the Magic Academy. Takatsuki continued explaining that Shikigami possessed extraordinary talent in healing magic and was widely known as the Priestess of Healing because of her remarkable abilities. She was also a summoner who had already formed contracts with several high-ranking divine beasts. She had been the one who completely healed the injuries Sasuke suffered after fighting the tiger demon. As for Shishido, he wielded the rare lightning attribute, a power considered to exist on an entirely different level from the common elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. After centuries, he had been chosen as the wielder of the divine sword Excalibur. Sasuke could hardly process what he had just heard. So the famous Priestess of Healing was actually Kazumi, and the legendary divine swordsman of Kanto High was that prince-like young man. Noticing his expression, Takatsuki quietly asked whether he knew her. Sasuke admitted that Kazumi was his childhood friend. Takatsuki reacted with obvious surprise. Sasuke explained that Kazumi had never known he could use magic, and he had never imagined she was a wizard either. He reflected that the existence of magic was obviously being hidden from ordinary people. That was probably why Kazumi had never told him about it. Or perhaps she simply did not want him to find out. Thinking back, her house had always seemed strangely quiet. Maybe that had something to do with her family circumstances. Takatsuki asked what he planned to do. Sasuke admitted he still did not know. However, until Kazumi personally chose to tell him about her situation, he believed it would be better to keep his own identity hidden. That meant making absolutely sure Kazumi never realized that Sokuin was the backup they had called in. Takatsuki immediately understood and pointed out that meeting everyone like this would make things inconvenient. He began rummaging through his belongings. Sasuke wondered if he was about to use a spell that could alter appearances, something worthy of a prestigious magic academy. Instead, Takatsuki simply produced a mask. Sasuke stared at it uncertainly. Takatsuki admitted it was a simple disguise, but insisted that as long as Sasuke kept it on, no one would recognize him. He also declared that if no one mentioned Sasuke's real name, the disguise would be perfect. From now on, he would address him as Sensei. Behind the mask, Sasuke silently questioned whether Takatsuki was an idiot. In the end, he decided it did not matter. No matter how ridiculous he looked, protecting the city was what mattered most. If acting like an oddball kept Kazumi from recognizing him, then so be it. After that, he would simply crush every demon that appeared. To be extra cautious, Sasuke also decided to alter his voice. After hearing the result, Takatsuki excitedly declared that it was perfect. Their conversation was interrupted when the impatient girl demanded that they stop whispering and come out already. Wearing the mask, Sasuke stepped out from behind the bushes. The moment everyone saw him, they all shared the exact same impression. A very strange person had appeared. Sasuke immediately realized that was exactly what everyone was thinking. The girl openly expressed her disbelief, while Takatsuki desperately tried to calm her down. Even Sasuke had to admit she had a point. She demanded to know why he was wearing such a ridiculous mask and accused him of making fun of them. Takatsuki defended him by saying he had his own reasons. The girl could not imagine what circumstances would force someone to wear a Hayatoko mask. Shido gently calmed her down. At his words, her anger instantly faded as she composed herself. Meanwhile, Sasuke grew increasingly irritated by the entire exchange. Shido then asked whether this strange individual was the powerful wizard who had come to assist them. Takatsuki confirmed that he was. The girl remained suspicious, wondering why Tsukumura had approved such a person. She then asked for his name. As she drew closer, Sasuke panicked. He needed both a fake identity and a different voice. The first name that came to mind was absurd, but he went with it anyway. The introduction only made the situation even stranger, especially after he randomly volunteered his favorite food and kept ending his sentences with an unusual verbal tick. The increasingly confused and irritated reactions only amused Sasuke, while the others struggled to keep the conversation under control. Eventually, Tsukumura stepped in to end the exchange. Quietly, she asked Sasuke why he was dressed like someone about to perform at a summer festival. He quietly explained that he was hiding his identity from Shikigami Kazumi due to unavoidable circumstances. Tsukumura repeated Kazumi's name in confusion. As long as it did not interfere with the mission, she had no objections, although she could not help noticing that Kazumi was already looking at him suspiciously. Sasuke shivered beneath the mask. He could practically feel Kazumi's intense gaze boring into him, like two drills. The dissatisfied girl once again protested against cooperating with someone so suspicious. Tsukumura calmly acknowledged her concerns, but reminded everyone that this very person had defeated the tiger demon completely on his own. She personally guaranteed his abilities. Regardless of anyone's opinions, his participation in the mission had already been decided. One by one, the members introduced themselves. After everyone had finished, Kazumi hesitated before asking if they had met somewhere before. Sasuke desperately denied it using his disguised voice. Although she accepted the answer, Kazumi admitted she had heard he was an exceptionally powerful wizard and wanted to know more about him. Sasuke inwardly panicked. Sensing the danger, Takatsuki quickly urged Tsukumura to begin explaining the mission. Relieved, Sasuke silently thanked him. Tsukumura agreed they had already wasted enough time and immediately began outlining the operation. The team would split into two groups. Takatsuki, Yutu, Vermilion, and the masked wizard would search the mountain area. Shikigami, Shishido, and Tsukumura herself would cover the outskirts. Their objective was simple: locate every demon they encountered and eliminate it immediately. If anything unusual occurred, they were to report it at once. Above all else, survival was their highest priority. As the groups prepared to separate, Kazumi lingered behind for a moment. Even after being called, her eyes remained fixed on Sasuke's departing group. Takatsuki motioned for Sasuke to follow him, once again addressing him as Sensei. Sasuke immediately told him to stop using that title. Watching him leave, Kazumi lowered her gaze, seemingly lost in thought. Elsewhere, one of the girls sighed in disappointment over the team assignments, only to be reminded that they were currently on a mission. Takatsuki urged everyone forward once more. Sasuke silently vowed that if Takatsuki continued calling him Sensei, he would make him stand in the hallway as punishment. The irritated girl complained as the two of them hurried ahead, while Sasuke casually teased her, making her even angrier. The quiet girl reminded everyone that they needed to hurry because the others had already begun moving. Suddenly, the energetic girl leaped onto a tree. With a single swing, she sliced through the trunk before spinning gracefully through the air and reducing the rest of it to countless pieces. Her sharp gaze fixed itself ahead. The enemies had arrived. Everyone immediately assumed their battle positions. Behind his mask, Sasuke narrowed his eyes as he locked onto the monsters waiting before them. Without the slightest hesitation, the group charged forward together, unleashing spell after spell as the mission officially began. The young Kazumi wondered why she could not live like a normal child. Someone gently patted her head and reminded her that the Shikigami family was a household of exceptional magicians. As the eldest daughter, she carried an important responsibility. Kazumi reflected on how every day was spent endlessly practicing magic inside their home. She felt as though she would suffocate if her life continued this way. One day, she overheard some children talking about inviting her to play, only for another to dismiss the idea, saying she would refuse anyway. Back at home, An elderly woman warned Kazumi not to spend too much time with ordinary children. If they ever discovered the existence of magic, Kazumi would no longer be allowed to play with her friends. Hearing those words, the young girl burst into tears and ran away while the old woman desperately called after her. Kazumi hated everyone. She hated her father, her mother, and even her grandfather. She hated them all. More than anything, she simply wanted to play with her friends like an ordinary child. Crying as she wandered away, Kazumi noticed a boy playing alone in the sand. Curious about what he was doing, she quietly approached him. He wore an unusually serious expression for someone at a playground. Unable to contain her curiosity, she poked him on the back. Startled, the boy let out a shout, which in turn startled Kazumi as well. Recovering herself, Kazumi immediately bowed and apologized for surprising him. She politely introduced herself as Shikigami Kazumi before asking what he was doing. The boy answered that he was making mud balls and proudly showed her one of his creations. Kazumi's eyes sparkled with amazement as she admired how beautiful it looked. The boy jokingly wondered whether she had developed a taste for mud balls. Kazumi immediately panicked, insisting she had never eaten dirt before. The unexpected misunderstanding left the boy completely baffled. Wanting to try for herself, Kazumi attempted to make a mud ball, but it crumbled apart almost instantly. The boy explained that making them properly took time and that they would not turn out well on the first attempt. On the verge of tears, Kazumi accepted his explanation. Seeing her disappointment, the boy suggested they make mud balls together. He assured her they did not have to do it that day since he would be back at the same time tomorrow. Kazumi froze in surprise before happily declaring that she would definitely return the next day. She promised over and over that she absolutely would come back. Seeing how incredibly excited she was over mud balls, the boy quietly remarked that her enthusiasm was almost overwhelming. Kazumi suddenly stopped, and without warning, burst into tears. The boy immediately panicked, apologizing over and over while begging her to stop crying because the neighborhood ladies were already glaring at him. Through her tears, Kazumi confessed that she hated lies and hated cruel lies even more. The boy promised he would not lie to her anymore. Kazumi then asked for his name. Realizing he had never introduced himself, the boy told her his name was Sada Susuke. Returning to the present, Kazumi remained silent, lost in those memories. Sukimura repeatedly called her name, but Kazumi remained completely absorbed in her thoughts. Suddenly, a monster emerged from behind a lamppost. Sukimura immediately warned everyone to prepare themselves. Kazumi snapped back to reality, only to realize the monster was already closing in. She hurriedly tried to deploy a barrier. Before the creature could reach her, a bolt of lightning struck it down. Shido asked whether she was all right. Sukimura quietly remarked that such swift thunder magic was exactly what she expected from Shishido. Shido casually replied that the demons in the area were little more than practice targets for him, so there was no need to even draw the divine sword. Sukimura sighed before reminding everyone not to lower their guard. They had no idea when a high-ranking demon might suddenly appear. As they continued searching, Shido remarked that it was unusual to see Kazumi so distracted during a mission and reassured her that everything would be fine. Kazumi quietly apologized. Deep inside, however, she could think only of Sokuin. She still had no idea what had happened to him, but she no longer wanted to remain ignorant. She resolved to face him properly and finally have an honest conversation. Meanwhile, on the mountainside, Takatsuki and the others launched a coordinated attack against another monster. Takatsuki unleashed flames from both hands, driving the creature away before signaling to Tia where it had fled. Instantly, Tia cast Soul Bind. Talismans materialized around her before shooting toward the monster and binding it in place. Mitsuki stepped forward, declaring that she would finish it. She raised her sword, cast another spell, and pierced straight through the monster's body. As it slowly faded away, blood splattered across her face. She remarked that it had been a decent opponent. The monster collapsed before disappearing piece by piece. Throughout the battle, Susuke never had the chance to act. He had remained in his fighting stance the entire time, while the others defeated the monster without him. Mitsuki questioned what he had been doing since the battle was already over. Susuke admitted that he had not managed to do anything. Takatsuki asked Mitsuki why she had not allowed Sensei to participate. Mitsuki insisted she simply could not allow it. She repeated over and over that she absolutely could not trust this cabbage. Hearing that, Susuke silently noted that she had essentially repeated herself 4 times. Takatsuki protested that Sensei had volunteered to help with the demon hunt. Mitsuki argued that his appearance at such perfect timing was exactly what made him suspicious. If Takatsuki had not brought along such a strange individual, she would not have to remain so cautious. Susuke flinched. Tia calmly urged Mitsuki to settle down, but Mitsuki continued arguing that they never needed outside help in the first place. The mid-ranking demon they had just defeated normally required around 10 ordinary magicians to eliminate, yet the 3 of them had defeated it with ease. Tia reminded her that not long ago, a high-ranking demon had appeared that even Takatsuki had been unable to defeat. If such a situation happened again, having another capable ally would be necessary. Mitsuki reluctantly admitted she understood. Since it could not be helped, she suggested that Cabbage should simply stay behind them and provide support. Sasuke objected, explaining that such a plan would not work. He revealed that his specialty was enhancing his own body with mana. He was not skilled at casting spells that projected mana outside his body, making it impossible for him to fight the way she expected. The revelation left the others speechless. Mitsuki stared at him in disbelief. Projecting mana outside one's body was considered the most fundamental technique every magician learned. She could not believe he was admitting such a thing without feeling embarrassed. Sasuke reflected that he had often been told the exact same thing back in the other world. Just as Mitsuki had said, he really had no argument against it. Smirking, Mitsuki concluded that this was exactly why they should never recruit random stray magicians. She mockingly questioned whether this was the so-called outstanding magician Takatsuki had found. Hearing her insults, Takatsuki finally exploded in anger. He warned Mitsuki not to insult Sensei any further, and even challenged her to compare the strength of his flames against her wind. Mitsuki immediately accepted the challenge. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, Sasuke inwardly cursed before desperately trying to stop the argument, insisting they should not fight over Cabbage. Before things escalated further, Tia intervened. She instantly cast a binding spell, trapping Mitsuki in place. Mitsuki angrily demanded that the barrier be removed, but Tia calmly reminded her that this was no time to argue. She also pointed out that Mitsuki had been injured. After healing her wounds, Tia released the barrier. She then reported that she could still sense demons approximately 210 meters to the northwest. Her eyes focused deep into the forest where the monsters were hiding. Mitsuki immediately decided they should head there. Tia instructed Takatsuki to come along as well, and he acknowledged her. Watching everything unfold, Sasuke thought that despite all their impressive strength, they were still only students. They were just as disorganized as grade school children during lunchtime. Unsure of his role, Sasuke asked what he was supposed to do. Without even turning around, Mitsuki sarcastically suggested he throw rocks from a safe distance. Sasuke simply accepted the suggestion, deciding it was best not to make her any angrier. Moments later, Mitsuki suddenly stopped to add one final warning. If he got in her way, she would kill him. The threat left Sasuke completely speechless. Ahead of them, hidden within the forest, the waiting monster slowly spread a sinister grin. The magic school students continued their mission to eliminate demons. In the residential area were Mist Tsukamura, Prince Shishido, and the Priestess of Healing. Meanwhile, Takatsuki, Miki, Tia Vermilion, and Cabbage Teru had been assigned to the mountainside. Takatsuki asked Tia whether the demon was just ahead. Tia confidently confirmed that it was. Without another word, Mitsuki and Takatsuki immediately rushed forward. Mitsuki charged ahead first, while Takatsuki quickly warned her that acting alone was dangerous. Following behind them, Sasuke thought the two of them were certainly hot-blooded. If he did not hurry, they would leave him behind. Suddenly, Sasuke stopped in his tracks and asked Tia whether something was wrong. Tia admitted that she wanted to apologize to him. Confused, Sasuke asked what she meant. Tia explained that Mitsuki had been treating him very rudely, and she felt sorry for that. Sasuke wondered why she was apologizing on Mitsuki's behalf. Tia explained that missions like this normally were not assigned to students because the target demons were simply too powerful. Sasuke recalled that Takatsuki had mentioned something similar earlier. Tia continued, explaining that Mist Tsukamura had requested reinforcements from Alteria's Kanto branch. However, the response they received was that their current forces were sufficient to continue the operation, so no reinforcements would be sent. Sasuke was dumbfounded. It sounded to him as though they had simply been told to stop complaining and deal with it themselves. Tia confirmed that was essentially the case. She explained that because of the severe lack of manpower, both the residents and the students themselves were in great danger. On top of that, there was currently no guardian assigned to protect the area. Then, just as they were facing the worst possible situation, Sasuke had suddenly appeared as a helper. Tia admitted that, to be perfectly honest, Cabbage Teru had looked incredibly suspicious. Because of that, she had initially suspected he might be a traitor sent by Alteria. Confused, Sasuke asked what she meant by that. Tia explained that within the magical world, there were magicians who actually hoped others would fail their missions and lose credibility. Quite a few people tried to raise their own status through such underhanded methods. Sasuke quietly realized that everything finally made sense. He remembered Mitsuki questioning how his timing had been far too perfect. In other words, Cabbage Teru had appeared at the exact moment they were most vulnerable to someone with malicious intentions. No wonder everyone had been so suspicious of him. Mitsuki had acted so harshly because she genuinely wanted to protect her comrades from someone she believed could be dangerous. Thinking about it honestly, If their positions had been reversed, Sasuke would have beaten himself up the moment he appeared in that park. He probably would have questioned whether anyone wearing such a ridiculous mask was in their right mind. Then again, maybe Takatsuki was not in his right mind either. Tia explained that although Mitsuki acted tough, she was actually terrified. That fear only made her even more suspicious than usual, causing both her words and actions to become unnecessarily harsh. Sasuke simply asked what Tia was trying to say. Hesitantly, Tia explained that no matter how terrible Mitsuki's words sounded, they did not truly reflect what she felt inside. She pleaded with Sasuke not to blame her too much. Sasuke fell silent, thinking that Tia really was a kind-hearted girl. He assured her that he understood and would treat Mitsuki just as Tia had asked. Surprised, Tia asked if he really meant that. Sasuke admitted he had never actually been angry with Mitsuki in the first place. Hearing that, Tia let out a relieved sigh and thanked him. Sasuke then asked about Tia herself. If she truly believed he was suspicious, was it really all right for her to tell him all of this? Tia explained that she was no longer suspicious of him. More than anything, it was because this was the first time she had ever seen Takatsuki admire someone so much. She struggled to explain it properly, but she simply did not believe Sasuke was a bad person. That was her honest opinion. Smiling warmly, she added that she actually liked Cabbage Teru quite a lot. Sasuke was caught completely off guard. Quietly, he accepted her answer while thinking that he had never expected to see such a gentle smile from her. After a brief pause, Sasuke suggested they continue on their way. Tia agreed. Suddenly, Takatsuki came flying through the air. He managed to regain his balance before landing on the branches of a nearby tree, astonishing both of them. After dropping back to the ground, Sasuke wondered why Takatsuki had returned. Tia's eyes widened as blood rapidly pooled beneath Takatsuki. Panicking, she asked what had happened. Takatsuki explained that they had encountered a large demon. It had ambushed them before they even realized what was happening. Tia urged him not to speak so much because of his injury. However, the moment she got a proper look at the wound, she froze. She immediately asked what had happened to Mitsuki. Takatsuki revealed that she had been abducted. Tia stood frozen in complete shock. Takatsuki apologized, blaming everything on his own incompetence. Keeping her composure, Tia declared that she would stay behind and take care of Takatsuki while asking Cabbage Teru to rescue Mitsuki. Sasuke stopped her and asked to examine the wound himself because he thought he might be able to help. Tia immediately agreed. After taking a close look, Sasuke calmly remarked that it looked like he had gotten himself into trouble again. Takatsuki apologized once more. Sasuke casually replied that there was no need to apologize. Then, without the slightest warning, he punched Takatsuki square in the face, launching him high into the air. Sasuke muttered that his strike had been a little off since he had intended to finish it in a single blow. Tia was completely horrified, unable to understand what he had just done. Sasuke calmly warned her to stay back because the creature was still alive. Tia could not comprehend what he meant. Moments later, Takatsuki's body hit the ground. Suddenly, additional limbs began growing from his back as his appearance slowly transformed into its original form. Tia stared in complete disbelief. Sasuke explained that the creature was using mimicry, and a remarkably detailed version at that. Even he would not have noticed the disguise without examining it up close. Sasuke then questioned the creature about Takatsuki and Mitsuki. He wondered whether it had also manipulated the situation that caused Mitsuki to recklessly rush ahead on her own. He pointed out that such an elaborate deception could never have been planned within a single day or two. Otherwise, it would never have been able to imitate Takatsuki so perfectly that even his own companions were fooled. Tia stood speechless as she listened. Sasuke then demanded that the mimicry answer him, noting that it clearly possessed intelligence. The mimicry finally spoke. It remarked that humans certainly loved talking and questioned whether Sasuke was really that happy about seeing through its disguise. Hearing the voice, Sasuke realized the speaker was female. The mimicry coldly remarked that he should have simply died peacefully instead of suffering like this. Suddenly, the monster began casting magic. Both Sasuke and Tia were shocked. Tia recalled Tsukumura explaining that demons capable of using spells were extremely rare. Sasuke remembered that the same had been true for demonic beasts in the other world. The mimicry summoned an enormous boulder and hurled it directly toward them. Sasuke calmly prepared to dodge, judging the attack to be slow. However, the instant he moved, he discovered that his feet had already been encased in stone. Realizing the monster had secretly cast another spell earlier, Sasuke was caught off guard. With no time to evade, he crossed his arms to block the incoming boulder. The tremendous impact crashed into him with incredible force. The stone imprisoning his feet shattered under the collision, but the impact launched both him and the massive boulder straight off the cliff. He disappeared below with a thunderous crash. Watching Sasuke be defeated in an instant, Tia stood frozen in disbelief, quietly whispering Cabbage Teru's name. The stone imprisoning Sasuke's feet suddenly shattered from the impact, and his body was sent flying together with the enormous boulder. He was thrown straight off the cliff. Watching Sasuke disappear over the edge, Tia stood frozen in shock. She slowly collapsed to her knees, believing that the poor masked man had died. Her mind raced in confusion. What had just happened? A stone pillar bullet? Earth magic? It had all happened in a single instant. The only thing she knew for certain was that she was now alone. The monster turned toward her and casually asked whether it should send her after the masked man as well. Trembling, Tia steeled herself. She was the only one left who could stop this demon. Without warning, the monster charged at her. Just before the attack connected, Tia deployed a barrier that intercepted the blow. However, the barrier immediately began cracking under the tremendous force. Staring in disbelief, Tia realized how overwhelming the demon's strength was. The demon scoffed at the fragile barrier. Its razor-sharp claws pressed against it, causing the cracks to spread even further. Refusing to give up, Tia cast Soulbind. As she completed the incantation, a massive magic circle appeared around the demon before heavy shackles materialized and tightly bound its body. The monster let out a furious roar. Tia desperately prayed that the strongest sealing technique created by the celestial magicians would succeed. The demon calmly observed the spell, remarking that it was certainly an effective technique for capturing powerful prey and could probably strangle even a whale. However, before Tia could feel relieved, blood suddenly burst from her own hand. She stared at it in disbelief. Even this spell was unable to restrain the demon. Moments later, the creature shattered the shackles with brute force. The backlash tore into Tia's hands, causing her to scream in pain. The demon complimented her skill, admitting that she was impressive for a mere student. Nevertheless, it declared that her technique was simply too weak to restrain someone like him. Tia collapsed onto the ground. The demon casually added that the humans he truly sought were someone else, so if he had to compare them, she was somewhat inferior to the others. Hearing those words, Tia silently admitted that she already knew. Her companions possessed extraordinary powers such as the Divine Sword, Divine Beasts, Ghostly Fire, and the Typhoon Sword. Compared to them, she excelled neither in offensive magic, healing magic, nor body strengthening. Even the one spell she had complete confidence in, Soulbind, had utterly failed. Even so, she had no choice but to keep fighting somehow. Struggling back to her feet, Tia demanded to know what the demon had done to Takatsuki and Mitsuki. She had to save her friends. The demon casually replied that he had no idea. Since he never bothered holding back, they might already be dead. In an instant, Tia launched herself into the air. Appearing behind the demon in a flash, she strengthened her fist with magic and drove it into the creature with all her strength. She clenched her teeth as she realized the punch had not moved it even slightly. Before she could evade, the demon counterattacked with a crushing blow to her stomach. Blood spilled from Tia's mouth as the impact folded her body. The demon calmly informed her that she could do nothing against him before slamming her violently into the ground. As pain overwhelmed her, Tia bitterly questioned herself. She had been recognized as one of the year's top students, yet when her friends were in mortal danger, she was completely powerless. Was she truly incapable of saving anyone with the strength she possessed? Clenching her fists, she repeatedly apologized in her heart. Towering over her, the demon remarked that she should not take it personally. In order to fulfill his most cherished wish, he simply needed to make use of her as well. The demon reached out to seize her. In desperation, Tia screamed and once again reinforced her fist with magic before throwing everything she had into one final punch. Before her fist could reach its target, another massive fist suddenly appeared and struck the demon with overwhelming force. Completely caught off guard, the demon was blasted away and tumbled violently across the ground. It quickly regained its footing. Standing before it was Sasuke. Calmly, he addressed the demon as though speaking to an annoying monkey. The demon coughed up blood while staring at the masked man standing before him. Sasuke calmly declared that they would settle things one-on-one. It had been quite a while since he had truly snapped. Meanwhile, the demon continued coughing blood in complete disbelief. It could not understand how the masked man had survived a direct hit from the stone pillar bullet. More frightening still was the unbelievable strength now radiating from him. Between heavy breaths, the demon admitted that the attack should have possessed more than enough power to kill him. Sasuke casually replied that he had not expected to be hit either. It had simply been a while since he had fought seriously, so perhaps he had become rusty. Then he openly provoked the demon, inviting it to come closer so he could tear it into pieces. The demon instinctively flinched. In the next instant, it vanished from sight and reappeared directly behind Sasuke, roaring that he should not underestimate him. Sasuke did not react at all. He simply stood there calmly. Just before the demon's attack connected, its body was suddenly sliced apart. In the blink of an eye, its severed limbs crashed onto the ground. Tia stood speechless. She could hardly comprehend the overwhelming display of strength she had just witnessed. This masked man was unbelievably powerful. Sasuke firmly demanded to know where Takatsuki Kuji and Yuta Mitsuki were. When the demon refused to answer, Sasuke stepped directly onto its body, causing it to cry out in agony. Finally, it admitted that the two were fighting alongside the demon's comrades. It explained that anyone splashed with the blood of the praying mantis demons would unconsciously be drawn toward a certain location. Bursting into laughter, the demon mocked Sasuke, asking whether he truly believed he could save them. Although those demons were weaker than he was, unfortunately, before it could finish speaking, Sasuke ended its life with a single strike. Turning back to Tia, Sasuke asked whether she could still stand. Tia answered that she somehow could. She pointed out that the demon had seemed about to reveal something important. Sasuke dismissed it, saying it did not matter. What mattered now was defeating the creature's companions as well. Quietly cursing to himself, Sasuke admitted that he had no idea where this so-called important location actually was. He could vaguely sense where they were, but after becoming rusty, he could no longer pinpoint the exact position. Hearing this, Tia quickly assured him that it was all right because she could locate them. Sasuke immediately asked her to guide him along the shortest route to Takatsuki and Mitsuki so he could rescue them without delay. Tia's expression softened as she thanked him. Deep inside, she realized that Mitsuki had been mistaken. This masked man was nothing like the dangerous person they had feared. Gathering her courage, Tia asked Cabbage Teru to tell her his real name. Using a strengthening spell, she grabbed hold of him, insisting that not even being able to address the person who had saved her life by his true name filled her with shame. Sasuke quickly protested, telling her to stop stretching his clothes and promising that he would tell her everything after this was over. At that moment, something fluttered gently through the air. Sasuke caught the small paper before asking what it was. Tia's expression immediately changed. Struggling to read the unfamiliar term, Sasuke muttered the beginning of its name. Tia explained that it was a magical item that could be attached to a target, allowing someone to control it remotely. Sasuke immediately asked what that meant. Tia gravely answered that someone had been controlling the demon from somewhere else all along. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mountain, Mitsuki and Takatsuki stood facing another demon while breathing heavily. The demon charged straight toward them, and Mitsuki immediately met it head-on. In the next instant, its razor-sharp claws slashed across her leg. Reacting swiftly, Takatsuki appeared from behind and launched an attack, only for the demon's fist to smash into his face, sending both of them flying backward. Mitsuki anxiously called out to Takatsuki, who quickly assured her that he was fine. Meanwhile, the demon simply grinned at them. The two of them wondered what kind of demon they were dealing with. Between heavy breaths, Mitsuki admitted that she had never expected such a powerful creature to appear. She hoped Tia was safe, along with that cabbage as well. No matter what, they needed to return to those two as quickly as possible. Takatsuki, however, found himself worrying about Sensei instead. Calling out to Mitsuki, he declared that he would distract the demon while she retreated first. Mitsuki immediately rejected the idea, insisting that she would be the one to hold it off while he stayed back. Without waiting for another word, she rushed at the demon again. Takatsuki shouted after her in surprise. At that exact moment, Sasuke sprinted past him at incredible speed. In a single fluid motion, he grabbed Mitsuki out of harm's way before driving a devastating punch into the demon, defeating it instantly. Mitsuki could only stare in complete disbelief. Takatsuki, meanwhile, exclaimed in amazement that Sensei had defeated it in a single strike. Just as he had believed, Sensei truly was amazing. He was the strongest. Hearing that, Sasuke quietly remarked to himself that Takatsuki really did sound like an elementary school kid. Tia hurried over and immediately checked on Mitsuki, holding her face while asking whether she was all right. Still stunned by what had happened, Mitsuki simply replied that she was fine. Tia let out a sigh of relief before thanking Teru-san for saving her. Mitsuki absent-mindedly acknowledged her words. At that moment, Sukimura arrived and congratulated everyone for their hard work. She announced that today's mission was officially over. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Sukimura praised Cabbage Teru, remarking that he truly lived up to everything she had heard about him. Embarrassed, Sasuke scratched his head and thanked her. Suddenly, he felt Kazumi staring at him from behind, causing him to tense up. Kazumi quietly announced that she would be heading home. Immediately afterward, Sasuke abruptly turned and ran away, hurriedly claiming that he had to wake up early for his part-time job. Watching him disappear, Mitsuki questioned what was wrong with that guy. Takatsuki proudly declared that overwhelming everyone through sheer strength without speaking unnecessarily was exactly what he imagined the ideal magician to be. Shido casually pointed out that this ideal magician had still chosen to wear that ridiculous mask. As Sasuke hurried away, he silently thought that his disguise had almost been exposed. Hopefully, escaping now would be enough to keep everything hidden. Meanwhile, Kazumi remained standing silently, lost in thought. Later, back at their headquarters, Tia finished presenting the mission report. She summarized that they had defeated a total of 7 demons during the operation. Tsukimura praised everyone, saying she was proud to be their teacher. Tia quickly corrected her, explaining that the mission's success had largely been thanks to Teru-san. Without him, things could have ended very differently. He had immediately seen through the demon's mimicry and seized the initiative without hesitation. Takatsuki enthusiastically confirmed that his abilities were genuine. Mitsuki, however, focused on the monkey demon instead. She complained that it had appeared disguised as Tia and acted as though she would not notice the difference. According to Mitsuki, Tia was far cuter and even smelled like flowers. Tia awkwardly thanked her for the compliment while quietly wishing Mitsuki would stop identifying people by their scent. Shido then remarked that Cabbage seemed unable to use any form of magic besides body strengthening, making him quite an unusual individual. Throughout the discussion, Kazumi remained completely silent. Tsukimura noted that she would have to properly thank Cabbage Teru later before moving on to discuss their next hunt. She explained that they had eliminated nearly every demon in town except for one enormous creature living atop the mountain. Tia confirmed that she had sensed it as well. The demon's presence was larger than anything she had ever encountered. The room immediately fell silent. Tsukimura continued by explaining that the creature had remained at the mountaintop for now. However, if it ever descended into town, the resulting destruction would be catastrophic. Therefore, everyone would gather tomorrow night to eliminate it. It would be their final mission in this town. Looking toward Kazumi, Tsukimura reminded her that she certainly did not want her hometown destroyed either and encouraged her to pull herself together. Kazumi quietly acknowledged her words. Shido remarked that ending with such a major battle sounded fitting, while Mitsuki eagerly agreed. Tia, however, quietly worried to herself. If this demon was even stronger than the monkey demon, could they truly defeat it? Suddenly, Tsukimura added one more condition. This mission would proceed without the masked man. The announcement stunned everyone. Tia immediately protested, while Takatsuki insisted that if they truly wanted to ensure success, Sensei's cooperation was absolutely essential. Tsukimura calmly explained that there were reasons behind her decision, but they were better left unknown. She simply stated that Cabbage Teru's background could potentially affect all of their futures. Takatsuki still tried to object, but Mitsuki cut him off. She observed that both he and Tia seemed to have become rather devoted fans of Cabbage. However, this was supposed to be a practical lesson, and she believed they should simply follow their teacher's instructions. Takatsuki could only fall silent. Tia still looked unconvinced. Mitsuki then turned to Kazumi and asked whether she had tried requesting help from her parents. Kazumi apologized, explaining that both of them were overseas at the moment while her grandfather had already returned to his own country. Takatsuki sighed, realizing the timing could not have been worse. Shido chuckled and encouraged everyone not to be so pessimistic. As long as they all worked together, they would surely find a way to succeed. Tia quietly repeated his name, encouraged by his confidence. Tsukimura smiled and pointed out that he was right. They had not been completely helpless against the monkey demon. Vermilion had successfully restrained it with her barrier and soul bind, even if only briefly. Takatsuki and Yuta had managed to hold their own against it together. Once Shishido wielding the divine sword and Shikigami fighting alongside her divine beast joined them, they would certainly be able to defeat the enemy through teamwork. On top of that, Tsukimura herself would also be participating. There was no reason for anyone to worry. Smiling proudly, she reminded them that they were all her students, and she believed every one of them would achieve remarkable results. Inspired by her confidence, each of them renewed their determination before answering together. Tsukimura dismissed everyone for the day, reminding them that the operation would begin at midnight the following evening and ordering them not to be late. Shido cheerfully declared that if anything happened, he would protect everyone. Mitsuki immediately called him an idiot for saying something so embarrassing. As everyone prepared to leave, Tsukimura stopped Tia and asked her to remain behind because she had a question. Tia agreed and asked what it was. Tsukimura explained that she wanted to know more about the monkey demon they had fought. It had seemed unusually special. Other than its mimicry ability, had there been anything else strange about it? She suspected it might be connected to the enormous demon on the mountaintop. Tia calmly replied that there had been nothing else unusual. Tsukimura quietly narrowed her eyes as she carefully observed Tia's unwavering expression before finally saying that she understood and apologizing for keeping her. Tia politely excused herself and left the room. Once she was gone, Tsukimura lit a cigar and quietly remarked that although Tia rarely spoke, her emotions were surprisingly easy to read. She found herself worrying about the girl's future. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, Sasuke carried several boxes while silently complaining about the lingering muscle pain caused by the side effects of his body's strengthening magic. Suddenly, his legs gave out beneath him, and both he and the boxes crashed onto the floor. Startled, Sassamine hurried over and anxiously asked whether he was all right or injured. Sasuke assured her that he was fine and apologized. Accepting her outstretched hand, he allowed her to help him back to his feet. After pulling him up, Sasamine quickly hid her blushing face while quietly noticing how large his hands were. Sasuke immediately panicked, wondering whether he had somehow acted like a creep. Trying to change the subject, Sasamine insisted that if he was not feeling well, he should simply leave work early and talk to the store owner. Sasuke once again insisted that it was only muscle soreness, but Sasamine grabbed him by the arm and firmly told him to go home anyway before calling for the owner. She explained that although she knew how hard Sadakuin worked, he should never push himself when he was not feeling well. Faced with her determination, Sasuke found himself unable to argue. Later, while walking home, Sasuke silently criticized himself. As a former hero, leaving work early because of simple muscle soreness felt unbelievably pathetic. He decided he seriously needed to resume strength training. After all, there was no telling when another demon might appear. Arriving home, Sasuke announced that he was back. His grandfather welcomed him home and asked why he had returned so early. Sasuke explained that he had been told to leave work early because of some muscle pain, although it was nothing serious. His grandmother sympathetically remarked that it must have been difficult. Sasuke assured her that it would disappear after he got some sleep. Relieved, his grandmother then casually mentioned that he had a visitor waiting for him. Confused, Sasuke asked whether it was perhaps a polite, handsome man with suntan skin like a sailor's, or maybe a cool female teacher that certain strange people would probably enjoy being stepped on by. His grandmother stared at him, before commenting on what a bizarre list of possibilities that was. It was neither of those. Instead, she revealed that Kazumi-chan was waiting for him in his room. Hearing that, Sasuke froze in complete shock. Meanwhile, Kazumi apologized to Sasuke for suddenly coming to his house. She bowed deeply, explaining that there was something she absolutely had to ask him. Sasuke accepted her apology, though he couldn't help feeling nervous. The last time Kazumi had been inside his room was when they were still children. As he awkwardly walked across the room, Kazumi noticed the strange way he moved. He brushed it off as nothing more than muscle pain, but Kazumi silently realized it was because of the battle against the demon the previous day. The realization struck Sasuke like lightning. She had known it was him all along. Kazumi confirmed that she had recognized him from the very beginning. Completely caught off guard, Sasuke could hardly believe it. The two of them sat facing each other. Kazumi admitted that she had been shocked. After disappearing for 4.5 years without a trace, Sasuke had suddenly returned as someone capable of using magic. She questioned why he had hidden everything from her. As a member of the Shikigami family, whose duty was to oversee the spiritual veins of the land, she believed she could have helped him. Sasuke explained that until recently, he hadn't even known that people on Earth were capable of using magic. The mention of spiritual veins only deepened his confusion. He had never realized Kazumi herself possessed magical abilities. Since magic was being concealed, he assumed she wanted to keep it hidden, so he had stayed silent as well. Kazumi wondered if that was the reason he had disguised himself during their encounter. Sasuke apologized, pointing out that she had also been acting like a completely different person. He admitted that his disguise had simply been an impulsive attempt to hide his identity. After a brief pause, Kazumi asked where he had been during those missing 4.5 years and how he had learned magic. Her question caused Sasuke to freeze. At that moment, memories of another world resurfaced in his mind. He remembered being summoned as a hero, entrusted with defeating a demon king to save an entirely different world. No one had ever believed his story before. The police dismissed him, interviewers rejected him, and everyone treated his experiences as delusions. But this time was different. Kazumi was a magician. She fought demons herself. Surely someone like her would understand. Convinced she would believe him, Sasuke decided to reveal everything. Relief spread across Kazumi's face as she smiled, grateful that he was finally willing to explain. Sasuke apologized for making everyone worry before beginning his story. He described how, 4.5 years earlier, he had been transported to another world, where he became its chosen hero. A princess had summoned him. He traveled alongside trusted companions, and endured merciless training under a strict master who happened to be a priest. Eventually, after countless hardships, he defeated the demon lord. He explained how he was celebrated as a legendary hero, remembered throughout history, immortalized in textbooks, and even became the protagonist of children's storybooks. He wished he could show her all of it. Unfortunately, when he returned to Earth, he brought back nothing except his memories. As he continued speaking, Kazumi's expression steadily darkened. Finally, she interrupted him. She had not come all the way there just to hear such unbelievable nonsense. Sasuke stared at her in confusion. Kazumi demanded to know why he was lying to her. The accusation stunned him. Before he could defend himself, Kazumi unleashed everything she had been holding back. During those 4.5 years, countless people had worried endlessly about him. His family, his friends, and especially her. She had searched desperately for him, even relying on magic whenever possible. But despite all her efforts, she never found a single trace of him. There had been countless nights when she didn't know whether he was alive or dead. The fear had nearly broken her. After putting everyone through so much pain, she couldn't understand how he could casually invent excuses instead of telling the truth. Sasuke finally understood. Everyone had welcomed him back with smiles, but before that, they had all suffered immensely because of his disappearance. He truly had traveled to another world and become a hero. Yet from everyone else's perspective, he was simply someone who had selfishly vanished without explanation. He had never even considered something so painfully obvious. Clenching his fist, Sasuke realized Kazumi had every right to feel that way. Kazumi admitted that when she first learned he had returned safely, that alone had made her happy. But after discovering he could suddenly use magic, she couldn't simply ignore it. She wanted an honest conversation with him. Instead, he continued telling impossible stories. Sasuke desperately insisted that he wasn't lying. He truly had been summoned to another world. Since magical summoning existed, surely summoning someone to another world wasn't impossible. Kazumi calmly explained that human beings could not be summoned. Different worlds like the one he described simply did not exist. Any magician should know such basic knowledge. Sasuke was completely dumbfounded. Even though both worlds used magic, their understanding of it was entirely different. No matter how honestly he explained his experiences, nothing he said would ever sound believable to her. Unable to think of another solution, Sasuke stood up. He apologized and asked her to forget everything he had told her. Instead, he claimed that he had simply run away from home for no reason before eventually returning, hoping that explanation would satisfy her. He knew continuing the conversation would only make things worse. Kazumi couldn't accept that answer either. She pointed out how disrespectful it was toward everyone who had worried about him. When Sasuke repeated himself, Kazumi insisted that his earlier explanation was impossible to believe. She became convinced he was hiding something and begged him to stop joking around and tell her the real truth. More than anything, she wanted to support him. Sasuke quietly refused. Deep down, he believed no one on earth could understand what had happened to him. This was a burden he had to carry alone. Without thinking, he blurted out that it had nothing to do with her. The words hit Kazumi like a knife. Sasuke immediately regretted saying them and tried to apologize. But Kazumi stopped him. If she truly had nothing to do with him anymore, then she understood. Today had shown her that he had no intention of telling her anything. She decided to leave. Sasuke desperately tried to stop her. Before walking away, however, Kazumi hesitated. She admitted there was one more thing she wanted to say. That night, the final battle against the great demon lurking atop the mountain would begin. However, the school had refused to approve Sasuke's participation. Turning away from him, she quietly stated that everyone would manage without him. Even Mist Tsukumura believed they would be fine. With that, she walked away into the pouring rain. After several steps, she finally stopped. Unable to hold back her emotions any longer, tears rolled down her cheeks. Meanwhile, Sasuke watched her disappear through the window. He cursed himself for being an idiot. No one would believe someone who couldn't even face the person they cared about and only spoke words that sounded like lies. Yet despite everything, there was still one thing he wished for. More than anyone else, the one person he wanted to believe him was Kazumi. Some time later, Sasuke's phone suddenly vibrated. Half asleep, he groaned and glanced at the clock. It was already midnight. The phone rang again. When he checked the caller ID and saw Sasamine's name, he answered immediately. Instead of hearing her voice, however, a complete stranger responded. Sasuke demanded to know who was speaking. The caller casually claimed to be Sasamine, but the crude, vulgar manner of speaking was nothing like hers. Annoyed, Sasuke pointed out that Sasamine would never talk like that. The stranger mocked him before continuing. Sasuke sighed, wondering who this suspicious person was and why they had Sasamine's phone. Thinking it was some kind of prank, he warned the caller that he was about to hang up. Then the stranger addressed him with a title that froze him in place. Hero. The caller explained there wasn't much time. The group that had gone to hunt the demon on the mountain was in danger. The signals coming from the mountaintop had become extremely weak. It probably wasn't the demons causing the interference, but someone was deliberately jamming their communications. Sasuke immediately demanded to know who the caller really was and why someone on Earth was calling him a hero. The stranger continued, saying that something had definitely happened on the mountain. Since the communications were blocked, even he couldn't determine exactly what was going on. Having delivered the message, he considered the debt he owed to someone else repaid. Furious, Sasuke warned the caller that if anything had happened to Sasamine, he would never forgive him. Before he could ask anything else, the call abruptly ended. As they climb up the mountains, Tsukumura muttered, "Quite the stormy weather. Let them climb up to the summit and bring this demon hunt to an end." "Yes," everyone replied. Meanwhile, Koizumi was all silent. Mist Tsukumura, level 66. Profession, teacher. Rank, upper first-class wizard in her special skill, nothing in particular. Second is Prince Shishido, whose level is 40. His profession is prince. His rank is first-class wizard, Promotion plans after graduation. The special skills are lightning magic and summoning divine swords. Next is Yuminchu, level 32. His profession is the next head of the Takatsuki clan. His rank is second-class wizard. The special skill is Dragon Flame. Then, Miki, whose level is 32. Her profession is mascot, and her rank is second-class wizard. The special skill is Hurricane Blade. Next is Tia Vermilion. Her rank is level 29. Profession is Seal User, and her rank is second-class wizard. The special skills are Soulbind and Barrier Magic. Last but not the least, the Healing Priestess, whose level is 37. Her profession is Summoner. Rank is second-class wizard. Her special skills are High-Speed Healing and Divine Beast Summoning. Do they want to leave this party? Yes. Mitsuki turned to Kazumi, asking, did something happen? Ever since she came back from Cabbage's house, she looks so down in the dumps. Kazumi told her she's sorry nothing happened. Nothing at all. Mitsuki replied, if that's the case. However, she thought, that's convincing no one though. Meanwhile, a talisman was posted in one of the trees. Takatsuki asked, is the placement fine? Yes, that's fine. Tia replied, and explained that it is a talisman to ward off people. With this, only them will be left on this mountain. Yeah, Takatsuki replied. Mitsuki then asked, hey, will it really be alright? Both Takatsuki and Tia are also making totally gloomy faces. Is it really that hard for them to accept that Cabbage wasn't allowed to participate? Shishido told Mitsuki. He told her, right? He will protect her. She has nothing to worry about. Instantly, Mitsuki blushed. Ryuya. Mitsuki slapped herself and said, all right, everyone, they're almost done placing the talismans. Pull themselves together. Understood? The three of them immediately replied. Tsukumura announced, this is the summit. Then she asked Tia, how is it? Can she sense that thing? Tia replied, she can, but Tia said in her thoughts, how strange. She can't get its exact location for some reason. Is there some power interfering with her senses? Suddenly, the ground began to crack. Tia gasped, it's coming from behind. And just then, a demon emerged from the ground. It was a huge demon lizard. Mitsuki muttered, wow, it's huge. Takatsuki said, so the last one's a lizard. Shido chuckled as he summoned his sword. Kazumi told them, please get down everyone. Then instantly, a large magic circle appeared before her as she said that, since their opponent is huge, they'll just have to make it fight with someone of its own size. She chanted, Divine Beast Jinru. As it appeared, she commanded that she would leave this to Jin. The Divine Beast, Jin replied, yes, master. Please step back. Jin faces the monster, with its eyes glaring. As Kazumi released her magic, the Divine Beast attacked, roaring loudly. And as the demon and the Divine Beast clashed, the mountain vibrated from the impact. Shido muttered, good going. Meanwhile, Tia gasped in her thoughts. That's Shikigami's strongest summon. Kazumi suddenly flinched, as she saw how the demon equaled the power of her summon. The others were also surprised. Takatsuki exclaimed, they are perfectly balanced in power? Mitsuki added that it already did well enough stopping its movement. Without hesitation, she leapt into the air and told herself, she got this. But just then, the demon noticed her and suddenly vanished in a swift moment. Mitsuki's eyes widened in shock. Her attack landed on the ground. She quickly spun back, creating a distance between the demon. She shouted, what the hell is with that thing? Why is it so fast at this size? The monster was about to plunge and attack. However, a lightning crackled into the air. Shido said, he shall pierce through it. Then he sprinted towards the demon, slashing it with his sword, and just above the demon, Takatsuki leapt and attacked it with his flame magic. Instantly, the demon was engulfed in flames. Takatsuki and Shido stood back, thinking they had ended it. But just then, as the thick smoke dissipated, the demon remained still. There wasn't any severe damage. Mitsuki gasped in shock. It can't be. It just left some scratches on its skin. Tia added that magic somehow isn't reaching it properly. Takatsuki said, robust scales and immense mobility. This one's on a completely different level to their previous foes. Shido smirked. You see, maybe he had been a bit rude to their foe, going so easy on it. It seems it's about time for him to take out the divine sword. Hearing that, Kazumi was surprised. Meanwhile, Tia began to panic as she thought, what should they do? For neither the divine beast attack, nor high-level fire magic to defeat, she won't be able to do anything with her sealing technique either. They are lacking something decisive to win. If this goes on, they'll be defeated. Suddenly, Tsukumura patted her and said, its scales are unusually sturdy. Huh? Let her blow them away with her arts. Everyone muttered in surprise, miss. Tsukumura told them, hey, stand back guys, if they don't, they'll die. Tsukumura touched the ground and instantly, the ground cracked, causing the demon to be thrown out into the air. Tsukumura muttered, as expected, this devil can't really move his body mid-air. Can it? Just go to hell. The ground suddenly rumbled. Then a number of sharp stones gathered midair, and it struck the demon, causing a large explosion. Kazumi gasped, "What an immense power!" The demon fell on the ground with its flesh opened, but just then it healed back instantly. The scales closed back, and the demon regained its strength. They were shocked. Mitsuki exclaimed, "Wait, how are they supposed to kill that thing?" Tia added, "For it to even heal itself." Sukimura calmly said, "Hey, don't be so impatient, guys. She'll rip off that armor once again." After that, all of them bombarded it with magic. That should do it. Yes, everyone replied as they thought the same. Right, it's not like that attack was completely ineffective. After Miss breaks that scales of that demon again, it'll be their turn. This time all of them will bombard it with their strongest attacks. The demon sticks out its tongue. Noticing its strange movements, Sukimura stopped and shouted, "Stand back, guys." Just then, the demon extends its tongue. Everyone was shocked. Takatsuki tried to attack it. However, the tongue swiftly evaded it and made it through Sukimura and instantly coiled around her, leaving everyone in shock. Then without wasting a moment, everyone rushed in to help her. But Sukimura shouted, "These idiots! Stay where they are." And just then, the demon pulled her with its tongue and swallowed Sukimura instantly. Its crunching noise echoed loudly as blood splurted out from its mouth. Everyone was left in shock as they watched how their teacher was eaten by the demon. After eating it fully, the demon faces them. "It can't be," they muttered.